that. Cholera still there, typhoid, HIV, AIDS are all there. But these are real lives affecting millions of people. Water Aid has grown to a charity now which has got an income of some £44 million a year. It collects income from the water companies, from a great deal of work which the water companies do to encourage charitable events. And it's just set out a 5-year plan which is to help 25 million people over the 5 years to gain access to safe water and sanitation in poor countries around the world, and to assist 100 million more through its advocacy and its influencing work. And when you see the pictures, we send people each year just to reinforce the commitment that the water companies have. Water Aid arranges trips to countries. 2 of my colleagues went to Malawi to see there, and these pictures are taken by Northumbria water people who visited as part of a Water Aid. And you can see that in one of the villages they went to, the only protection that the well had was a tyre that they put round the opening to try and prevent things from falling into the water source that they had for the village. Another nearby village, the only water they had in the village was this river, where everything happened basically. They washed, they drank from it, they basically ran off animals into it. This was the only source of water there. The people who visited came across Agnes, got to know Agnes quite well. She was attacked by a crocodile in the river. It was a dangerous place, and this is getting your water, and it's not very good water, from a place where crocodiles can try and have you for lunch. And Agnes survived, luckily, a crocodile attack there. There are no pipes there, typically in the village, to carry water, to transport water from one place to another. And what Water Aid does is put in relatively straightforward, simple technologies so people can get access to water which, by their own standards, is remarkably clean and able to be the basis on which villages can start to develop. And people who'd spend hours carrying water from one place to another can suddenly start to do things and solve the way in which they get what is pretty good, pretty clean water, which they can then use and develop and build their community. So that's a sort of background of what's happening around the world, and it's happening in many places around the world. All of these countries are places where Water Aid sees the need to help to create new water sources, to help create fresh water for people to drink. They're trying very hard over the next 5 years to, as I said, develop those many millions of people that they can help. But the figures are astonishing when you look to see what needs to be done. 1 person in 8 around the world has no access to safe drinking water. 2 in 5 people around the world have no access to adequate sanitation. Water Aid's own estimate is that 4,000 children die each day from diarrhea around the world. And the health of the populations in the countries that you saw are really revolutionised by successful action on the basic provision of water. So we know that water is essential for life. There are 2 sides to the water business. Firstly, providing by some agreed definition high quality drinkable water, and secondly, dealing effectively with sewage. They're generally drawn together into the same companies in the UK. That's where we operate, but not entirely. There are water companies that deal just with the freshwater side. Northumbrian Water deals with both of those activities here in the northeast of England. In Essex and Suffolk, where we also do business, we provide fresh water, but we don't do the sewerage. That's done by another company in those areas. And the pattern of mankind's development has been tremendously influenced by water over the years. You can see it as you look at great rivers where populations have come together and where towns have been formed. You can see where there was enough water to help civilizations to develop, to help grow food, to provide transport, to keep the environment clean, and sometimes to provide security with rivers and just the geography that helped there. And the efforts to harness water in the UK have had tremendous impact on the engineering industry and capabilities. The scale and the skills of engineers around the UK were to some considerable extent built up because of what was happening with the need to build massive solutions to water problems. After I'd produced my 2004 report, which was a report on public health for the government, I was invited to give the Duncan Lecture at the University of Liverpool. Dr. Duncan is a famous name. You've heard John Snow, who's also a famous name. John Duncan was similarly famous. He was the first medical officer of health in the UK. He got the job in Liverpool in 1847, and it's a very similar story to the John Snow story. One of his successors has described Duncan's time as medical officer of health. Scientific medicine was still in its infancy, sanitation almost completely neglected, public health a dream of the future. Epidemic after epidemic swept through Liverpool at the time, a huge concentration of people, very similar to parts of London. Duncan's view, and it's recorded in what are papers which still exist, and the books have been produced about him and about his life. His view was that the tragedies that were happening, the epidemics that were happening, were within human control, was the way he described it, preventable by comparatively simple means, and he set about trying to do that with his colleagues in local government, and it's a great local government story, because having been appointed as medical officer of health, he needed allies in local government in Liverpool. One of them was the admirably named Mr. Fresh, Thomas Fresh, who he set about this task of providing clean water. Thomas Fresh had the even better title. His title in the local authority at the time was Inspector of Nuisances. and Thomas Fresh as Inspector of Nuisances, and Duncan as first medical officer of health in London, in Liverpool, the first one in England, really set about this task of trying to improve the health of Liverpool. And as one of his successors noted, 100 years afterwards, when he wrote a book about Duncan, many of the improvements in environmental hygiene would have proved impracticable if the town council hadn't taken energetic action to increase the water supplies. They worked out in Liverpool that's what was needed. Cleanliness depended, they said, on copious supplies of water, making more urgent by the progress that was being made on sewering and draining the district, which meant that they needed yet more fresh water. The rapidly expanding community led to new water supplies being brought in, a new reservoir opened, and by 1860, obviously in reporting to whoever the equivalent of Gordon Brown was at the time, Duncan was writing about the value of the money spent, the number of lives that were saved each year by what had been put in place in Liverpool, and as he called them, rich dividends in the improved health of the community. So it was a great story. The Victorians did a great deal for us on both sides of the water industry, and they left behind also some fantastic buildings. I mean, would you believe this is about water? But this was to show people how solid water was. This is in Riot. This is one of ours in the northeast. So public health has been, and in fact continues to be, a major factor in the UK for developing and regulating our water supplies. The story of water and the story of public health, they very much go together. Clean water has helped populations develop. How much water we need for all our activities of daily living is a subject of government attention. We've recently, all of us, had to produce water resource plans, region by region around the country, and those water resource plans assume we'll be able to reduce our per capita consumption of water in the future as the population continues to expand. A very small proportion of our water is drunk. How much do we need? How much do we have to drink each day? We rely on public health experts to give us best advice on that. It depends how active we are, how big we are, how hot it is. But bearing in mind that adults are up to 3/4 water, and that dehydration is a nasty thing if you get that far. You get headaches, you get lethargy, you get lack of concentration, and increasingly unpleasant symptoms, which I won't go into. But how much is recommended for us to drink depends on who you listen to. But the Food Standards Agency say the equivalent of 6 to 8 glasses of fluid a day. And there is a bit of a debate between the water industry and the Department of Health and the government about whether it's water or fluids we should be talking about. I'm not sure it's a very productive debate. I mean, clearly, if all the fluid were alcohol, 6 to 8 glasses might be inappropriate. If it were all carbonated and sugary, that would probably be inappropriate. if it were all caffeine